Venice, it's like you cannot catch Venice in a sense that the image is overloaded by the sensation of every time I go to Venice, I think of the thousands and billions of couples kissing in the hotels near Rialto in a honeymoon. So it breaks up in thousands of perceptions. So do we have the real Venice? That's the question. So I decided no. I decided not to talk about any real Venice, but about how Venice resonates, the idea of Venice resonates in 1,000 kaleidoscopes, and even a bit with a very long side diversion, talking about how the ideal of Venice generated very strange thoughts in architectural theory of the last 100 years. So the first part will be almost not understandable, get what you want. It's a bit of a stream of consciousness. And then I go back a bit to my personal relationship with Venice. I hope I will stay in the time of 3/4 of an hour, Scott. Is it right? Okay, I hope. Okay, so now I share my screen. Okay, so I changed a bit the subtitle. I wanted to make it a little bit more fun, starting from the Stone of Venice, and I put it, the Rolling Stones of Venice, because the modern interpretation of Venice, it's all started here. John Ruskin wrote this book, The Stones of Venice, from 1851 to 1853. Actually, I just been researching on Wikipedia, and Marcel Proust, translated it into French. He was very impressed by it, but of course, I will not sum up what he says in a book. Basically, what Ruskin says, I'm trying to synthesize a bit, is that there were happy workers in Venice, hitting on their chisels to sculpture these beautiful capitals in a free way until the Renaissance came. He sees the phenomenon of the Renaissance, including Palladio, as some kind of fascist architects who, starting from Vitruvius and from a very abstract point of view, they impose a standardized design on the free mason, some kind of, and they say they messed it up. But drawing Venice, describing of his moldings, redrawing with love, he also started out this idea of seeing in the most artificial city of the world, which is Venice, it's 95% covered by stones, the stones of Venice, something close to nature. So in a way, in the stones of Venice, he compares the lines of the capitals with the lines of rivers and mountains. This idea of the meander, in a way, to us, many times when you do small parks, the meander is the figure of nature. When you do a small corner park in New York, to try to evoke nature, you do this meander. But in a way, the whole city of Venice is a paradox, because it's a fluid city. Its shape, it's born under an interaction between the work of man with these billions of wooden piles, which in a way gain more and more surface to a cluster of little islands. So it's both the most built city in the world and also the most natural. The Canal Grande is itself a meander. It's a sort of paradox. So in a way, when we look back at the history of human settlements, we have an idea that when we look back to historical, this is a Mexican village, there's some kind of intrinsic, how could you say, biodegradability, in a way, if we abandon this place for 20 years, it will go back to nature. Even this is, of course, because of materials, but somehow it's another paradox. Something man-made looks like it's made directly from nature. Even the most cultured side of it, this is the famous Nolli plan of the central Rome. Giambattista Nolli, he was evoked by Bob Venturi in his Learning from Las Vegas. Something we built, a very artificial city like Rome, it feels like a natural phenomenon. In this case, let's say the shrinking of a crystal of gelatin. Come in front of the historic city, we have this feeling of a second nature, But sometimes, some moment, this broke up. One could say we lived for this sensation for years and years, and then something around the 1850, we felt the historical city was not anymore suited to our needs, was too small. We invented the railway, the infrastructure, and we tried to apply to city planning what we could call Taylorism. Now, this is a very Marxist picture with a factory in the middle and all the order houses of the workers around it. So, this rationality we employ to go from a craftsman's attitude to an industrial one, we applied also to city design. The grid, this is the city of the sewers, the city of the electrical plants, the city of the engineer. But at least this city, which should have been ordered and maybe have some kind of beauty in its order, think about the American movement of the city beautiful with the Columbian Exposition, 1893, Chicago, and so on. The grid as a tool of giving order somehow revealed unexpected, almost surrealist side effects, the chaos, I would say, of the metropolis. And if we look today to an Eastern city, can we still apply the canons of symmetry, order, perspective, proportion to the city? No, in a way, the night spectacle of an Eastern city with billions of inhabitants looks like it's out of our control. We made it, but somehow it escapes our control, like a natural phenomenon. Looks more like a volcano or something. So it's the first generation we really feel we are, in a way, endangering our world, this problem of ecology. This is the picture of Milano with infrared photography from, the satellite, and the borders between city and nature and or agriculture somehow are not there anymore, this expansion of the city. In a way, Milano from the satellite has the 4 alarm characters of the melanoma, A, B, C, D: symmetry, border regularity, color, and diameter. We start perceiving cities as the cancer of Mother Earth. So, in a way, all the instruments tradition gave to us in the last century were somehow thrown away. The idea is, the birth of modern architecture, 1920 something, was, we should for a moment interrupt tradition. This is, to build a skyscraper in a shape of the Campanile of San Marco is stupid. We should start anew. We should forget all forms from tradition, and we should start from the analysis of function. This image actually is taken from a book my father brought back from New York in 1964. It was a General Motors model of the modern city, the future city. And this to me also expresses the way functionalism look at the city. It analyzes its function, the function of dwelling, the function of working, the function of moving, the function of getting together. You give a single response to all these things, and then you put it all together and you create this. But the city which we generated, I'm talking, of course, in Europe, but we call it, edge city, sprawl, many names have been tried. This is a typical, Italian suburban landscape, half city, sort of this edge city thing. It works very well. It is suited to our needs. We enter a highway, we go out a highway, we go play tennis in a bubble, we shut ourselves in a residential quarter, we go to have fun in an entertainment center. But in a way, one could say this works very well, but it lost, one could say, the fecund overlapping of roles and functions that the Italian historical city had. A square can be used in a day for a religious thing, and then in the evening, can be used for restaurants. In a way, we go to have fun into a big cinema, suburban cinema with a multi hall cinema. But in Venice, you don't need a playground because the whole city is a playground. That's the thing. We lost, in a way, the serendipity, the separation of single function in the suburbs, leave what you see in the center of this picture, this black hole, which is in Europe is full of immigrants and dirt and this and that, which is the leftover of the separation of function of the modern city. So the theory of last century tried to put it all together, and it started from an organic metaphor, the idea of circulation. So all the utopian models, this is Victor Gruen. Actually, when Walt Disney died, they find on his table the book by Victor Gruen. Few people know that when he designed Epcot in Florida, he had these ideas in mind. He's wiping out our notion of the historical city, and he started out with this organic idea with the heart, with all the cells, or something which is relating units with the circulation. And again, this sort of tree-like structure comes out in the theory of last century. This is Bruno Taut. I will go very quick, of course, through this. This is Bruno Schwarz. The idea that the new city should behave like a tree. This is the diagram by Ludwig Hilberseimer going to, he was the one who invented the vertical city, but escaping from Germany to Chicago, he theorized the American suburbs and this sort of fish spine. This is an organism, like a squid is different from a vertebrate. This organism, which is the base of the American suburb, is very different from the European cities. When you go in a road, you end up what is called in French in a cul-de-sac, in a dead end. So it's very different. It's a tree-like structure as opposed to a grid, even if it's an organic grid structure. In a way, to go back to the highway, you have to take the same way back. Somehow, what we call in Europe the Team 10, the Team 10 was a group of young people organizing the last Siam in Othello. They tried to merge, in a way, modernism with some idea of the tree, in this case, which what today we could call a macro structure. Can we breed the idea of the city with the idea of nature? When we see the project of the Allison and Peter Smithson for the reconstruction of Berlin, this is 57, someone who knows Berlin can still recognize the Altes Museum, the Pergamon Museum, the Reichstag, the Tiergarten, but basically, it's a very fascinating project, but in a way it does not understand the city. It keeps just some fragments, and it totally redesigns a network of, in a way, highways, urban highways, you see them, and over it, it launches bridges, raised pedestrian bridges with towers, which in a way is like Venice. It's a blown up version of Venice where cars are gondolas and the campielli, the path, are raised pedestrian things. So the idea that you could get to a pedestrian, a system completely separating from a traffic one. All what I wanted to say is that the organic metaphors we use so much in even contemporary theory they have a long time. This is 1753, is Abel Auger, who says that in a way Paris is like a giant forest. And this idea that the city is capable of generating even psychic thoughts as the one of nature. This is already interesting, Walter Benjamin. In a way, while what we think of the historical city, you have the individual element, which is the room, which protects us, and you have the public space, which is the street and square, who, in a way, it responds to the basic needs of men, to be protected and to be together with other people. But then you have the portico, which, like in Bologna, it ties the individual room to the public space. You have what we could call urban design, is a mediation of scale between the single and the collective. In this case, Walter Benjamin says that the contemporary city, it lacks this middle scale. It opens as a landscape and it encloses as a room. Isn't this a perfect metaphor of the contemporary city as opposed to the historical city? And then Christoph Alexander in 1964, he wrote an essay called A City is Not a Tree, criticizing this hierarchical planning. He, in this case, uses the tree as a model, as a things which branches out in a single way. You know, on the left, on the upper left, you see this idea, the single dwellings, they make neighborhood units, they make satellite towns, and so on. He says the historical city on the right, it behaves more, rather as a semi-lattice, he calls it. You know, a lattice work is something where each node has multiple relationship with the other ones opposed to one. So he criticizes the tree model as being too deterministic, as branching off in ways which are too simple. This is quite interesting because we use the tree model as something free or organic, but he criticizes it, saying the historical city is much more interesting. When we look at the city is built by us, but also is a source of perception. These are famous paintings at different hours of the day by Monet of the Cathedral of Rouen. Is a cathedral a body, a building, a set of stones, or a generator of perceptions? This is the other big paradox. The painterly mode, you know. People go to Venice to paint it, you know, they sit there with an easel. And today, as the old painters used to paint the old city, you have painters who go to paint the new artifacts, in this case, the highways. And in the 60s, Kevin Lynch wrote this famous book, The View from the Road, and he tried to make a theory about the moving eye and how it changed our perception. And in a way, his theory was that since moving with the car, we keep on moving, we need fixed points, in a way, landmarks, to orient ourselves. So he sees the monument. You know, monument in the European language, it means something which reminds us of something else, maybe of a great king or whatever, or religious things. But in a way, in this idea of the monument is just a visual target to give us a fixed place in a moving world. This, I would say, perceptual attitude also has to do with design. One could say that the two big ways of looking at designing, one is to build from the foundation on in a neoclassical way, but this was a strange architect called Doxiadis. He was obsessed by the fact that the Parthenon and the Acropolis of Athens was sort of looked like random, but he said that secretly the Greeks used angles and point of view to proportion things. This is its analysis from the Propylae to the Ereteo to the Parthenon, saying in reality you have viewpoints as proportional elements, which means you have a tradition of perceptual design. You know, the first one is Villa Adriana by Adriano. Then you have this, we could call it religious park, Sacro Monte, I will not go into it, by Alessi. But the last one is the Kresge College by Charles Moore. He built in the middle of a forest a student college, tried to employ all the techniques of surprise, viewpoints, which is a subjective view. So in a way, one could see the Getty Center by Richard Meyer, the big, they inherited of the famous Hearst Castle. You know, when they asked Julia Morgan, the architect for Hearst of the Hearst Castle, they said, what is the style of these things you design? And she said, I call it the style pleasing the client. In a way, it's a pastiche of all ages of this to generate, I would say, picturesque sensations. So while Mies van der Rohe was building in Barcelona the famous, you know, Barcelona Pavilion, some people consider it one of the landmarks of modern architecture, with this distinction between structure and space, you know, the Barcelona Pavilion. In the same exposition, they built what is called the Poble Espanyol. They built a total fake village. But what is interesting, which is a collection from all the villages in Spain, put it all together from very different regions. So in a way, this was all designed as some kind of bonsai city, uniting very different views. It still exists. If you go to Barcelona, you can go drink a beer there. It's a fantastic place. It's a total fake village with view, let's say, picturesque views from very different places in Spain, collected in one place. So all these resources of an architecture which is eager to please, they are employed in contemporary let's say, shopping centers. Yesterday, I saw the interior of the new Costa Crociere boat, and it's amazing. Inside the boat, they did David by Raffaello. It's like a shopping center with everything what people think Italy is, you know. So, in a way, our ideal of the organic city, a city made also as it would be a natural, today is a shopping center. This is a famous Gerde, in a way, utopian and advanced conception of a big shopping mall in the shape of a city. You know, this is an actual shopping mall. I mean, it's an outlet between Milano and Genova. You get there with a car. You have an immense parking. It's very successful. You park your car. This is the view. Nobody, of course, is up there in the tower. You get in, and what is paradoxical is that, you know, an international brand like Nike is represented to a building which is a cross between the Genovese tradition of painted architecture and the Lombard, say, farmhouses. You know, it's amazing in a way. It's like a Magritte painting, Cécine Pampa. Adidas is represented by a fake 1600, you know, building. My son said, Papa, can you take us back to the fake city where they sell very cheap Nike shoes? You have cameras all over, you know, surveillance machines. Somebody at night just closes the electricity and goes away. So it looks like a real city. It's very, very successful. You got the stage illusion of a real historical city, what you would think it is. But it's built in that way. See, that was construction phase number 2. It's built like in a rationalist way with concrete, post and beams prefabricated. And then a scenographer comes, it wraps it all around. And as you notice, the windows of the first floor are all painted black. Nobody lives there. You have these flowers. But I heard that people go there and say, can we buy that apartment? This image to me is the strongest hit to the modern ideal of, you know, the splendor, the beauty is a splendor of truth. All modern architecture is based on the frame of showing construction. Are these things still with us? Maybe with the architects, but the rest of the people, for them, a fake, you know, lips, you know, a silicone lips, if they look like real, they are real. Yesterday, they told me, architect Zucchi, why don't we put a nice parquet, a wooden board? Today, you do ceramics, exactly looks like wood. And I said, no, I would not put plastic flowers. I say, but it looks like real, and you can clean it much easier. It will not deteriorate. So this, in a way, it's something to think about. It's an international product. It's a main street, and then you regionalize it. Each place, they take scenographers. It's made more by people who do stage sets. So in Belgium, you have to look Belgian. In France, you have to look France, and so on. And what is interesting about this, that if commercial center, to please people, they're copying the historical city, historical cities, they start to behave like commercial centers. This is a real place. It's called Loc Mariquet in France. It was an abandoned real medieval villages. Somebody bought it. They put a parking. You pay 10 euros and you can go there, and they turn it into a shopping center. The image on the right is the famous Mont Saint-Michel, Visite Historique. Example, if you go to Italy, near Bergamo, we build a big new airport, and Bergamo, the real town near the airport, got an incredible success because people, they were stopover. They fly there in the night, they go in the hill town of Bergamo, is full of shops, and then they go to wherever. If you don't have the money to come to Italy, you can go to the Mediterranean Park in Tokyo. It's a breed between Portofino, the sort of aristocrats Paris, and it's even pre-washed, like a set of pre-washed jeans is the first pre-washed architecture. And of course, you can go to Las Vegas, to the Venetian, So this, it takes all the figures of Venetian, it puts like a big screen, but you see the cars. You never saw cars in Venice except for Piazzale Roma. And then you have escalators in the Rialto Bridge. So everything is convex. In the back, you see a big Las Vegas hotel. And you go inside, you have a fake ceiling, which also changes with time. It gives you impression of the time. And you have these gondolas on rails, so they will not hit the borders. Everything you need, you have the Ponte dei Sospiri. And as you see, it's an interior with a parking garage. This is the plan, the Great Hall to Casino, the Canal Grande, everything is like bonsai. Actually, the original plans Walt Disney did for Disney, and in a way, if you think of Disneyland, it's the perfect union of our idea of a picturesque city with nature. Disney with the Matterhorn and the alligators, the fake alligators, put together perfectly our ideal of city without the old nature. Disney managed to put it all together. So the futuristic city, the monorail, and the main street where the grocer gives you a candy are the big figures of commercial architecture. Can we transpose this in modern times? In a way, nostalgia and high tech. When we go to films, many times we go to romantic films, should we choose, or sort of transformer films. In a way, commercial architecture to me today takes these two figures. Then once you're in a shopping center, you can see the shopping center as an alien being, like in Alien, which sucked in the complexity of the city and made it into interior, and the rest can be just parking. In a way, it's like the cuckoo's nest. So, to make a history in 1 second, one could say the historical city gathered together, moving, staying together, privacy, all in a place. Then the metropolis with a grid made a total different scales. But today, especially in a northern city of America or Canada, where the climate is not so good, we are leaving the grid to the delivery trucks, and we are building a set of skyways and tunnels which recreate the historical city either inside a suburban shopping center or in this case in a downtown, so the pedestrian separated from the cars. Again, the model of Venice with bridges and bridging over is the sky. Think of today's how we connect blocks with shopping center and leave the grid only to delivery trucks. One last thing before talking about Venice. This is a famous 1965 ideal of the environmental bubble invented by Rainer Banham. He was very prophetic, very hippie. Once you have a connection, this is before internet, 65, nobody knew what internet was, but the idea is once you're connected, you can stay naked and you can stay in the top of the mountain, okay? So in a way, once you have connection, in this case, it's a vehicular connection, and today we have internet, you don't need the city anymore. In a way, the city was a place to stay together, but we can stay together in many different ways. The other day, I was in my living room and my wife said, "What are you doing, Cino?" "I'm chatting with Anna, my daughter." I said, "She's in the other room." "Yes," I said, "I was chatting with my own daughter and she was like 10 meters away." That's a paradox of today. So the interior with your iPod, all you need is a suburban house. But then all this, the suburban sprawl can give a problem to ecology. This was the famous 1972 Club of Rome MIT algorithm with the limits to growth. And actually, when I read this book, I got so scared. I applied to MIT, and this is Cino Zucchi, Artificial Intelligence, 1977. I could write in Lisp. This is, I found the other day, my notebook of MIT. I run there to save the world, from ecological disaster. So we are paradoxically reevaluating density. Density was the enemy of the theory of last century, because of ecological reasons. You see the relationship between gasoline consumption, of course, I'm simplifying a bit, and you see that all European cities, they consume, let's say, 10, 15 gallons per inhabitant, the blue ones, and the American sparse, Houston, Phoenix, Detroit, Denver, they're very sparse, they consume 80. And even in terms of compactness, the worst, urban apartment is much less energy consumption in terms also of electricity, of heating, in respect to the greenest house. There was an American journalist said, the green Vermont is much less ecological than the dense Manhattan. So today, some people are reasoning on a concept of density in an ecological way, in a positive way, and some people try to, and we see these pictures every day, to put together the idea of density with the idea of green, this sort of. But I actually quite scared by these images. Are these cities? Can we call these cities? I mean, I'm not sure that density plus greenwashing we generate, they look a little bit alien to me. Especially, they don't look like things which have the power of change or resilience or modification in time as your cities. They look totally deterministic. Once you build them, they can only work the way you envisage them. Architects are specialists of, they think they're democratic, but in a way they are foreseeing fascist futures. These dreams by architects can only be used their own way. I think, on the contrary, the other day I was in Paris, I took this picture of Place des Vosges, that, in a way, all Europe has a long history and tradition of having the best of both worlds, both good architecture. This is a perfect square. It's one of the oldest Parisian square, but it's very environmentally fantastic. And this is, the crescents of Bath. This is Mirabeau in Aix-en-Provence. It's just, in a way, it's a cathedral of trees. So I think the European cities has a lot still to say, without being nostalgic, about the relationship between environment and urbanity. So I feel myself very European. That was a sketch by Le Corbusier. And in a way, I feel city like a big city. I took, you know, I went with my Vespa to Linate, which is a nearby airport. I took the plane to Paris. I took the plane to Bordeaux for working. And the same day I was back in my, I went all the way. I took my Vespa again. I went home and my wife cooked some delicious risotto. I was a day commuter to Bordeaux, which is not so close to Milano, taking 2 planes. So the Alps are the Central Park. We are the Pride side. We really do feel Europe is this way. I'm a little bit long. I tried to quicken up. Some years ago, in 2014, I was commissioned by the ministry to cure the Italian pavilion at the Biennale. The pavilions, national pavilions, are quite independent from the main theme, but Rem Koolhaas, he was the general curator, gave a suggestion which was called Absorbing Modernity, 1914-2014. He was posing to all the national pavilions. How did each country in a way related to modernity? I had just 3 or 4 months to put it up. I had to make something. I went to the Ministry of Culture and I say, I think this. I think Italy, if you have, you know, of course, in expositions, you always have to be a bit synthetic. Italy is a place where the overlay of things is such a mess in a way. All the cities, this is a picture of Rome historically. It's like that in a way, we don't have the blank slate. It's the different from, we are exactly on the other side of New Zealand. You know, the antipode of Italy is New Zealand. While in the new countries, you have nature and you have to build new structure, we always work on a field which had the traces of man-made things. So we always graft on something. And what I was saying, that grafting is a violent act. It needs to change the biology, it's violence. But to do it, you have to know very well the organism you're grafting on. So I try to oppose the traditional concept of, you know, adapt to the context, you know, that today can have almost a commercial view. You know, you go to Mexico and you put on the tourist the Mexican hat. You go to Venice and you put a gondolier's hat. You adapt to local customs. That's a typical tourism. I said a graft is violent, but it needs to understand the place. No, as opposed to I will adapt to the local customs. This was my pavilion. I will not explain it. And actually, I said, you know, since I am doing something which was called grafting, I will do the first one. I designed a metal portal. It was in a way forbidden. This is very historical part of the Arsenale. But then people like it so much. Actually, now if you go to Venice, it's still there. They left it. It was a temporary thing. So I built this. I call it the Archi funnel. It was a metal. It is a metal big funnel to attract people in the pavilion. And for some reason, everybody felt, you know, they left it there. So basically it became permanent if it was to be nasty grafting. And I will not go through it. I did a super quick history of Italian architecture as the idea that it was never virgin. This is actually the Campidoglio, the way Michelangelo found the square of the Campidoglio. So there was two existing buildings, and if he remade the facades and he flipped, so even the Campidoglio is not a new project, it's a refurbishment project. This is, in a way, the Santa Maria della Pace square ditched in the historical fabric of Rome, and this is a church by Gioponti, this idea of open space. I will go quickly. This is Sebastiano Serlio saying that all the plots are crooked, and then you need courtyards to make it straight. So it's a way how to correct the irregularity of geometry in existing sites, so in urban sites. This is Leonardo da Vinci proposing for the Duomo of Milano so it's like, in a way, it's a dome on an existing Gothic piece. This is Alessandro Antonelli, which actually the one he did the Molo Antonelliani in Torino, grafted on this incredible, very high dome. This is much later in the 1800s and so on. This is modernist architecture tried to deal, actually Terragni tried to deal with the presence of the Colosseum. And again, Terragni doing a modernistic houses on top of a medieval house in Como and so on. This was my show. I showed Milano, but Milano is a laboratory of modern architecture. And I showed all the possible Milano, all the way the city grew on itself with all the interrupted plans, how the old hospital of Milano from the 1400 was continued in the 1600, then was bombed by the, in 1943 and reconstructed partially. So it's a fabric we lasted 600 years. And how, when Milano was bombed in the Second World War, we rebuilt in modernistic time, but what was interesting, we kept the fabric. This is very interesting because while Dresden and Rotterdam were built into modernistic plans, in this case, you see the white are the new buildings and the gray are the existing buildings, so the different typology, but they keep the existing morphology. Can we graft on an existing morphology? This is actually a picture. You see actually on the right of Milano, you see in the center the famous Torre Velasca, the Velasca Tower. You see a mixture where you see tile roofs of existing fabric, and the one you also can spot the modernistic one, but they are on the same layout. That's a peculiar way Milano was reconstructed with. So it has this modernistic architecture we try to fit in both from the point of view of language and this to the existing one. I will go quick. Okay, just to say just one project beside Venice, I will explain my Venice projects, that this grafting on, when I have the occasion, I do it. This was a competition for a dismissed industrial area in Torino, which was quite central. And I did the Lavazza headquarters, the Lavazza Coffee. As you see, I kept existing buildings, the one you see in wood, with the most precious one, and I built this headquarters. So it's a very contemporary looking 700 people work, but we used the existing building as a museum of Lavazza, as a congress center. And this is what it came out. It's a modern building, also, as you see on the right, with an existing building. And as you see the portico on the right, it's the idea of transition. It's prefabricated, let's say, artificial stone concrete slabs, fillets, and always attempts a dialogue between the old and the new. Actually digging in underneath the existing factory, we found the Romanesque basilica. It was desperate because we had the underground parking, but then we adapted it, and I managed to change the project. So from the street, you can see the rest of this Romanesque basilica, talking about layering in Italian cities. This is a portico, a contemporary portico attached to the side of the existing factory and a new garden. So the idea, can we put together, in this case, green environmental things, existing buildings, new buildings, and an urban reformation? That's the Molo Antonelliani you see back there. Okay, so in the last 3 minutes I will speak about my Junghans projects, because I suppose this is the reason I'm here. Just again, dealing with Venice. When I was a kid, I used to play the cutouts with Venice. Venice, there was a book, it's called Venice is a Fish. This is a Google view, of Venice. And in a way, it's the most artificial city and landscape city. It's marvelous because you get out of a very small street and all of a sudden it opens up. And my argue is that we tend to design spaces for behaviors, but the big lesson of the European cities that the same backdrop, even if evolves in time, this is Piazza San Marco, you see on the left, is not the way it looks now before the Renaissance. This is 1406. And this is 1700, the new Piazza San Marco with the Renaissance going on. and the paving is like it is today. And then they used to build inside Piazza San Marco temporary setups. This is the fair. So you see the square is used for temporary market. And this is when actually in 1902, all of a sudden the Campanile fell down. This is the ruins, and then had a big debate, and they decided to build it as it was. Actually, you can find on the internet the picture as it falls down. You have a famous postcard because somebody managed to take a picture of the bell, the San Marco falling down. This is Mussolini, having big, say, speech there. This is an advertisement of Coca-Cola with the pigeons. So Venice is also an international place. This is where you have Acqua Alta, the high water. Now they found it even squids or, nature gets in. And this is the Pink Floyd concert who left a lot of rubbish in 1985. So the same place can host actually very different activity, fascistic ones. The other day I was in Place de Vosges and I picture these young, many people in the same benches, and there were people from all ethnicities, kissing people, LGBTs, lonely people, old people, people with kids on the same bench. I don't think we have to design the bench for homeless, the bench for old, the elderly, the bench for young. I think that the bench is waiting there after the COVID. So this is the carnival. This is even the Venice in advertisement. This was a famous TV advertisement of, Barilla. Barilla is a famous food company. And this is not advertisement for Louis Vuitton. So Venice is a place. This is Venice during the COVID. Nobody was in Piazza San Marco. And there was a French writer. He wrote a book against Venice, saying today Venice is just the place where all the rich, affluent, cultured people of Europe go there. Is the perfect stage for, artistic things. You have, the Pinot Foundation, you think the Prada Foundation. So basically it's the stage set of exhibitionist Europe, of the yuppies of Europe. Okay. Going back to the Jungas, allow me 5 minutes more. This was the existing factory. They produced watches. I actually have a Jungas watch. And this is the literary view of Venice. So there was a conflict between the way it really was. The Giudecca Island was an industrial part of Venice, and what we think it's the ideal Venice. This was pictures of the site as it was before my intervention. It looked like the Bauhaus. See, this is not the typical view you would expect from Venice. It's the backyards of Venice. And this was actually, I was very young there, it was 1995. I was very honored to be, I never expected to win this competition. The story is very complex, I will not narrate it, but this was my competition model, to put it in a bigger model. And then in the end, this what came out after a long political thing, so I did the master plan. Actually, as you see, I cut through canals through it. So this was the existing situation. It was a total enclave. I still have the keys. I'm not joking. In my car the other day, I found the keys of this place, which was a totally enclosed place. And it had this very strange, big sort of fan-like building. This was the competition project. What you see on the left was an existing school which had a dead end there. So the whole thing was to try to open up to the Laguna view. This was the final master plan after many compromises. And the blue, you see, we cut a new canal through it. And these are the buildings I designed. So I had the chance to design 5 of the buildings. The client was terrible. This is a Google view. You see the new canal we cut through. And this is a view. So basically, it is Venice, but it is the backside of Venice. So it's a little bit less dense, less touristic than the rest. Google again. And the question is, what architecture can you do in Venice? Can you do the side of, Piazza San Marco? But, Venice is also this, can you redo things like the one you see on the right. And actually this idea of Venice also has to do with the myth of Venice. This is a beautiful project by Gunnar Asplund, one of the best Swedish architects, who, doing a competition in 1914 for the Royal Cancellery, he was just back from Venice, and he designed Stockholm. It's a very water cities, and in a way, he broke up the program of the very big institutional buildings in a fabric of palazzi overlooking some the things that you can see really Venetian. He made this sort of variation. Each one looks a little bit different. And this is actually when they had the question of whether the Campanile di San Marco was to be rebuilt as it was or redesigned. This is a cartoon of how Otto Wagner for the Venice Secession would rebuild Piazza San Marco. Then Le Corbusier and Louis Kahn did project for Venice, and this is Niemeyer. When I was working, they said, Cino Zucchi, we kicked out Frank Lloyd Wright. Also, Frank Lloyd Wright is the Masieri Memorial. We kicked out Le Corbusier. He never built his hospital. We kicked out Louis Kahn. He wanted to build the Congress Palace in the Giardini. You know how long would it take to kick out a Milanese like you? Like saying, this insularity of Venice rejecting modernism. So you have some attempts of modernism. This is the famous Casa alle Zattere by Ignazio Gardella. Actually, this is the first version. That's Luciano Baldessari. You do have De Carlo, Gino Valle try to build it. The attempt of modernist architecture to compromise with Venice. And this is me turning an existing industrial building into something which can hold a backdrop. So this is a refurbishing, and so this was the existing state, and this is what I did. That's the final. So it's an existing transformed building. And I tried to make a square. What you see on the left is the existing school, but this place is not existed. It was an industrial space. Then this building was too rotten to be rebuilt, and I built this one. As you see, there is something which you can tell it's modern, but if you squint your eye, you almost don't see it. It's like almost camouflaging. That's the new building. I go quick. So this whole project is a mixture of, I didn't do it all. I also had to accept architects, which I don't like very much, to be sincere. But each one is responsible for what I'm doing. This is a new part. And it's not very easy for an architect to build in Venice. It's like, sometimes I said, to build in Venice is like going out with Nicole Kidman. You are always anguished, and then some journalists will pop up and take a picture of you. So it was difficult for me to do something. I trembled to this task. This is the new canal we built. It's the back of the building you saw. So you get a new view on the beautiful laguna, which overlooks the south. So it's very landscaping. But the buildings are they always want to try to not to imitate the existing building. My client wanted me to make fake Venetian buildings, but with elevators inside. So the technology was modern, but on the outside, it was like a crust. And I tried to, in a way, keep the fabric, but keep the language, say, reasonably contemporary, I hope, even with some gentleness. You see with the mixtures of some of the existing buildings are quite more traditional. We even use the existing wooden piles. In this building is founded, the brick wall you see there, it's an original one. So we use the foundation of the wooden piles. We didn't make any new foundations. I go quickly because I'm out. This was, see, you're in the back of Palladio, but this was the existing situation of the Jungans with a smokestack. This building actually, it was a dead end. You would cross the bridge and you find yourself into a blank slate. So we opened it up. We did something which we call microsurgery. This actually is a subsidized social housing, so it's a very cheap building. And we kept the smoke stack as a memory of the industrial past, try to envelop it. And actually, this is what you see when you cross the Canal of the Giudecca, is looking from far away. And this particular one is the most, I did actually 5 buildings, but this has been, in a way, like a singer who do the hit. You do have, like a hit. Because I tried to be contemporary, but somehow I did some kind of hyper-picturesque. And again, you have to see it in an urbanistic way. This is the cut we did through the path I showed you before. We cut through the existing building to get to the square. So this path did not exist. As you see, this is the closest things you could do to a courtyard, and actually I use only 3 kind of windows. The living rooms, very rationalistic, are the big square ones with just a small white, lintel. Then you have the bedrooms, which are the elongated ones, and the bathroom and kitchens are the one who has the widest white corniche. The 4 little holes, the 9 little holes are the one for the kitchen, for national relation. So it's the closest things we could do to existing fabric. We, of course, for hygienic reasons, we could not do any more closed things. How to do a house in Venice? Take a piece of what you call butcher paper, put on a record player, the record by Fabrizio André, it's an old folk singer. Think of your first love and cry a bit, and draw the windows where the teardrop have fallen, and hop. Of course, this is a self-satire, but some people took it for real. And did we try to do abstraction like in a Mondrian painting or picturesque? I still don't know. This fascination with popular architecture, this is Coderc, and this is ours. In a way, how can I say, is it camouflage? Like this crazy American scientist tried to put a soul into a checkerboard to see what it does. So it's the closest things we could do to, that's an existing house on the main Giudecca fondamenta, we call it. And all these sort of hanging clothes, people in Venice, they like to do this. What I didn't expect is that this is a very localized building, but then its image spread around. It was used in magazines, some even painters painted it. Somehow it struck the popular image. So in a way, the physiognomics of a building, do buildings have faces? Do we see faces everywhere? And in a way, we are talking about landscape, maybe even a landscape as a face. I'm part of the generation which has been raised with typology, the type. But then this on the right, you have this Austrian sculptor called Messerschmitt, who sculpted people into physiognomies, into expression. Maybe the typological obsession made us forget building has faces. They make faces, And through the forming proportions, many times you can make different expressions just by proportional things. This is a famous Dürer diagram of how you deform human faces through proportions. And this is Okusai making faces. So maybe my building tried to make a face. And to finish up, and I'm now really finishing, with this nature obsession, which ties together the theme of Venice with the themes of man-made things. This technological jump, in a way, detach technology, mechanics from nature. But now we are back to the Leonardo da Vinci's dream. Like, in a way, a Pixar movie, we have the algorithm, the mathematics of a flock of birds of the sea, somebody who does animation for Pixar know the secret mathematics of the universe, which was Leonardo da Vinci ideal. We are touching real information technology with nature. This is marvelous. I'm happy to live in this time because people dream forever to touch this moment. So Paul Valéry wrote an essay called The Man and the Shell. He says, when we go on a beach, we pick up a shell and we observe it as it was man-made. But the way a shell produces the shellfish produces the shell, it's in a way liquid. It's not thinking about it. That's the only thing it can do. I found this big team, they did the algorithm to produce the decoration on shells. This year, they discovered that the decoration of shell are like neuronic ways of inhibiting chromatic generating cells. And with an algorithm today, with parametricism, you can generate both the shape of a shell, which is a spiral, and its decoration. So we got to the secret. Today, with the computer, we can produce that's the computer generated and the real shell. But what Paul Valéry says, the shell can only do his own lecture. Thought is not necessary and we don't understand that. And then he said, we begin our work starting from different freedoms. The freedom of matter, the freedom of figure, the freedom of duration, all things which are forbidden to the shellfish. That's my shell. It's called Xenophora pallidula. In Latin, it would be translated like the pale carrier of stranger is a shell which picks up everything she finds on the bottom of the sea to use it as to make his things. I think I work this way in a more bricolage way. So people associate so much me to the Venice project. This is a caricature they did on me, where when I draw, I use this sort of Venice tunica. But then, the other day somebody gave me a quotation. They said something like, I don't know any inspiration which is not hard work. So I think coming the summer, you have a choice. You're from Australia, can go up windsurfing or roller skating, but the real architect should be pale. So the only solution is work, work, work. And I thank you for your patience. And I would say I think I went a little bit overboard, but if you have any questions, I'm more than willing to respond to them.